This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Today we're joined by my new friend, Dr. Don Davis, out of the great state of Texas. He heads up a great Christian school there, and they're doing some really cool things. And here's what I love about this podcast, guys. We got Don Davis here, who has a huge Christian school, and we've had other guests on here that have smaller Christian schools. And what I love is we can learn something from the big ones, we can learn something from the small ones, and take these things back to your school that you can make your school better than it is right now. There's a lot to learn out there, and you're going to learn more on today's episode because Don is awesome. So please enjoy this next episode of the School Success Podcast. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, joined by a new friend out of Houston, Texas, Dr. Don Davis, who is the head of school of Second Baptist School, of course, in Houston, Texas. They're doing some amazing things. They're growing really quickly, and I was like, I have to have him on the podcast because he's also friends with some of the other guests that we've had on the podcast. So I don't want to take any thunder away from him. I'll kind of pass it off to him to introduce himself. So, Dr. Don Davis, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. And thank you for having me on.
It's going to be a blast, man. And I always start by asking some small talk with the guests. So I've actually never been to Houston. I have landed in Houston, but I was just a connection. So if I was ever to come visit in Houston, what are we going to do for fun? What is there to do? I know there's a ton because it's a ginormous city, but like you're like, Mitchell, you got to do these things when you come to Houston.
You have to eat Tex-Mex. It's amazing. You would want to come during the rodeo that is in the spring, and we have the world's largest rodeo. And so that's always a great time to be a part of that rodeo. And then you have to stop by NASA and check out all the incredible things that are going on in space exploration.
Okay. Those are good. Houston, we have a problem. Duh. I mean, that's like part of my childhood, I feel like. So good. And I've heard it's never hot in Houston, Texas. As you were saying earlier, it's never above 100 degrees, right?
It is always hot in Texas until you have a hurricane, and then it gets cold that winter.
Man, well, you guys got hit. What was it? Was that 2 years ago? How long has it been now?
5 years ago. It was actually 30 days after I took the job here at Second Baptist School. Hurricane Harvey hit on back to school night. Our families were there, and the storm came in, and I canceled school the next day at back to school night, and the rest was kind of history. I mean, we were hit really hard in this area of Houston.
Did you guys close the school for a while? How'd that? I'd love to actually just hear a little bit.
10 days. We were out of school for 10 days. And so honestly, over the last 5 years, it's been interesting. We were just recounting this at the start of school. You had Hurricane Harvey. You had the big freeze that all the power grids went out. You had the pandemic. I mean, there's just been, if it's not a natural disaster or a pandemic this year, I don't know how hard it would be.
Well, obviously, I'm glad you guys are doing good. You've rebounded. You guys are having some exponential growth right now as a school. And I would love to just, before we kind of dive into the school itself, I'd love to get a little bit of your background. You've been in education for a while, and I think you've been at the school for 3 or 5 years or something. I think you're close to. So kind of just give me a little bit of background on Don Davis.
Yeah. Well, I started in education as a teacher and a coach, and I've been in Christian education for 21 years. And I started in New Jersey, and then I spent 8 years at Lakewood Park Christian School in Auburn, Indiana. And then I went to Delaware County Christian School in Philadelphia and worked for a man by the name of Steve Dill that I still count as a friend and a mentor now. He had been in Christian education nearly 50 years and just retired from ACSI. And then I had the opportunity to work for Tim Weens, Dr. Tim Weens, which is now at Mount Perrin in Atlanta. And I worked for him for 4 years before becoming the head of school here at Second Baptist 5 years ago. I'm heading into my 6th year here as the head of school.
Man, good deal. And I'm assuming 5 years in, you're loving it. You guys are growing and things are moving in the right direction, but you love what you're doing, I'm assuming.
I love it. I really do. It's a great place. It's a ministry of Second Baptist Church. The mission of Second Baptist Church is the Great Commission found in Matthew 28, and where Jesus tells us to go out and make disciples of all people. And so our passion statement here at the school is aligned with that. We want to see every student come to know the Lord as their Savior, and then equip them to do with excellence that which God has called them to do. And that's our why. That's why we get out of bed every morning. That's what we're excited about is when it comes to education is partnering with parents and first worrying about the heart of the child and that it is surrendered to Jesus Christ, and then equipping them with the skills, the knowledge, and the wisdom to go out and impact the world.
Love it. That was a good why. I think that's a good one to get out of bed in the morning. I agree. Well, I would love to dive into the school, of course. If you can give me a little bit of history on the school before I dive into a couple questions I had from you about how long you guys have been around, how big your school is, and maybe some of your, I guess, growth goals, even though we'll dive into a few of those in some of the questions, but just a little bit of history on the school.
Yeah. So last year we celebrated 75 years of Christian education. The school was founded in 1946 by a small group of parents. They had a kindergarten class with 14 students in it. It grew very quickly, and until 1980, I think it was a K-8 school. Then in 1980, it launched its high school, had its first graduating class in 82. And then we just celebrated 75 years last year. When I arrived 5 years ago, we were just under 1,000 students, pre-K through 12th grade. And we had experienced, like a lot of Christian schools had, 4 years of declining enrollment. And so now we're back to 1,115 students this year. We're excited about that and healthy enrollment. We're happy with that. And then last year, we launched a new model of education, a classical university model, and we offered that of education on 3 of our campuses. We purchased a campus near our main campus here in Houston, and then we have the model on 2 other of our church campuses, and we have close to 800 students in that model. So this year will be really close to 100 students on 4 campuses across Houston.
Man, that is incredible. And I think that is a perfect segue into the first little bit of questions, because with that growth, it comes, I'm assuming, some challenges. So I would love to hear kind of what are some of these challenges you guys are currently up against, but not just, oh, woe is me, here are these challenges, but also like, how are you combating those challenges currently so other schools can kind of learn from you guys?
Sure. Some of the largest challenges, as you can imagine, is the staffing. So we've doubled our number of staff in the last few years. So we have close to 350 school staff. And onboarding. How do we onboard those staff to make sure that they understand our culture, our mission, our vision, our values, that they operate and in a consistent way according to both our mission, but also consistently for the benefit of our families. So our families are experiencing a consistent product. So that's been a challenge, finding the right people and hiring the right people and onboarding them and training them, getting them up to speed. That's been a challenge. Another challenge for us is with our growth has been organizing our organization. And what I mean by that is we now have 2 models of education that operate on 2 different school calendars that function differently. And so right now I'm leading executive leadership teams. And so we're trying to understand going from a single site school to now a multi-site school. That's been a unique challenge for us in just what's our leadership model going to look like. And so there'll be obviously some centralizing of those functions and then decentralizing. And anytime you're growing, those you have to just think through that management structure. And I'd say the third one is just a great opportunity for us. We're launching 2 more campuses. This is the launch year for those. We'll open the doors in the fall of 2023. And so our admissions process begins in September. And so we will be hiring and recruiting students for 2 additional campuses in 23-24. So I would say finding staff, onboarding, training staff. I would say organization and structure is a big challenge. And then we just have another launch coming right on the heels of our last big launch. So,
Man, I would love to digest a couple of those real quick. So staff, and we've heard this from some of the guests that we've had on, of just the how hard it's been to find staff, and the ones that are available, they get snatched up by other schools. And so obviously, being a Christian school, you have a couple. I feel like almost harder for you guys in a way, because you're most likely wanting them to be Christians, of course, that are teaching at the student level. Is that been a really big challenge to just find them? And then if you find them, they're like, oh man, they're not to the caliber that we want, and maybe you're having to lowering your standards for different things because there's just this shortage right now. Or I'd love to digest that one a little bit more with you.
Yeah. I know that is a challenge, and in our classical university model, it's been a bit more of a challenge because we have a lot of those positions are part-time positions because the students aren't on campus 5 days a week. They're on campus in lower school 2 days a week, in middle and upper school 3 days a week. But on our 5-day-a-week campus and our administrative positions in our university model, God has been really good to us, and we have seen our talent actually exponentially increase. The number of people that desire to be on our team has been pretty humbling and pretty exciting. Part of that, I think, is just the clarity in which we've created here. And I can go into a little bit more of that later if you want, or we can unpack it now. But our organizational health and our culture of our school, and I think great leaders attract other great leaders. And I have not been shy about putting great people around me, because I never want to be the smartest one around the table. You're on the wrong table if that's true. And so I've been able to bring some people on my team that are nationally recognized leaders, as well as just high caliber leaders, which then in turn attract other high quality leaders. And so it has not been the challenge I thought it was going to be. But we've also done a lot of work over the last 5 years to prepare and put ourselves in this position. So organizational health and culture, I think, is really important, and it will attract high caliber leaders and educators if you have that culture in place.
Love it. And I agree. I love that so much. And to digest that second one that you had mentioned for the organizational part that you guys had created, is that something you guys hired in, like an employee to do that, or an outside business like to consult and coach you guys in how to structure? Because 350 people, that is a lot going on. And I'm assuming having a church that's, of course, a part of this too, they're probably very organized, being as big as they are as well. So I'd love it as schools are listening to this to go, oh man, I don't think we're as organized as they are. And we have 10, 20 teachers or 50 teachers. So if we kind of even unpack that a little bit too.
Yeah. It'd probably be good to bring a consultant in. That may actually be something wise. We've just tried to apply some basic principles to it, understanding loops. How is information cascaded through the information? And then what's the chain of command to come back up through the organization? And then we've really tried to do a good job of making clear the teams, who's responsible for the academics in our 5-day traditional model. Who are the people that are responsible for that? And then who leads that team and kind of owns the curriculum, if you will, or, who owns the admissions on each campus, who owns the advancement and the fundraising function, who owns the communication strategy. And so as you identify that organizational structure and make sure that you have those KPIs, key performance indicators, in place, clear, then, I think that begins to help you flow. With the growth, with the exponential growth that we're having, it's been hard to settle into it and into an org structure, if you will, because we're having to add people so quickly, and those lines and those org charts are shifting so quickly. And so we've had to really make sure who's doing the communicating, who's responsible for which parts of the organization, what are their KPIs, and what's the feedback loop to eventually get back up to me, so so that we all are on the same page.
Yeah. And that's awesome. And I think that's something that the schools listening in can learn from, because I don't know if that's something everybody's thought of. If you just have, we're just going to hire somebody because we know we need a third grade teacher or whatever. And then, who do they report to? It can get kind of crazy. And I feel like if people coming on, if let's say you have your current staff, they're talking to their friends in the community about, man, I love working here. I know exactly what my roles and responsibilities are. And they're like, it sounds very clear and clean, like what you're doing. So hopefully that also helps attract more people because you have a very good organization structure, which it sounds like you guys do. So I love that. So then now I'd love to dive into one of my favorite parts, which is getting you a chance to brag about your school for a little bit. I know we've even already done that a little bit with the growth and the new campuses, but you need to repeat yourself. It's totally fine. But giving you a chance to brag, what's some awesome things that you guys are doing right now that you'd love to share?
Yeah. I think we have a lot of great programs. We have a lot of things that are going well. Honestly, the thing that I'm most proud about is the culture we've developed here. And I think that has to be the foundation. That has to be where you start before you can start to build or grow. You have to make sure that the foundation is stable. And 5 years ago, that's what I did. 5 years ago, we were siloed. There was a bit of a toxic culture within the organization. They've gone through a lot of upheaval on their leadership teams and transition in their leadership, and that can just break things down very quickly. And so, great book, First 90 Days. It's like, okay, assess the situation. You always want to look back to understand the history of an organization, the history of the people. You want to know the people really well, know what the current challenges are before you can lead forward. And we spent that first 90 days to 6 months really just getting to know the people, spending time with the people. And then we went to work doing two things. One, really clarifying around 6 critical questions that Patrick Lencioni talks about in his book, The Advantage, but in identifying what's the culture going to be here. And so our why, what's our why going to be? That's our passion statement. How are we going to behave? What's our core values? We're a Christ-centered school. We're going to pursue excellence in all things, and we're going to be a caring community. So we filter everything we do, our response to COVID, through those 3 core values. We identified what our ideal team player looks like. Well, how are employees going to respond to one another? And we want employees that are humble. We need employees that are hungry. We need employees that are people smart. We need employees that are positive, and we need employees that are loyal. And so, again, Patrick Lencioni's ideal team player is humble, hungry, smart. I've added positive and loyal. Positive is the grease that makes things work smoothly, and then loyal is the glue that binds us together. And so we've cascaded that all through our organization. And we rewrote our philosophy of Christian education in year 2. We developed a portrait of a graduate that became our mission statement. So our mission statement is to equip students to think critically, to live biblically, and to lead courageously to impact the world for Christ. And there flushes out some ideas under each one of those headers, but we've made it our mission statement memorable, and we've made it our mission statement all about the graduate that leaves the school, and from an understanding of like what we believe in our core values, how we're going to operate with each other, what we're aiming for in our portrait of a graduate. Now we're in a 5-year strategic plan where we're working backwards, and we're developing what we call what matters documents. What are the objectives that we're trying to accomplish in each discipline? What are the goals in those disciplines? and what are the documents and the curriculum that we need to build out in each of those disciplines to make sure that we do everything we can to help a student achieve that portrait of a graduate. So our organizational culture, I would give us an A plus for we have a great plan in place. And from there, now you're seeing some just tremendous statistical growth, if you will. We set unbelievable records in our 5-day traditional model here in acceptances into, both in getting into elite schools. We had 210 acceptances into 210 different colleges and universities. We had our kids passed the AP, had a pass rate on the AP exams of 88%. The national average was 55. And so I tease with our leadership team. I guess what my dad told me is true. If you're in school, you're going to do better on the tests. And we were in school every day, during the COVID deal. Our students had $16 million worth of scholarships offered to them. So it was just tremendous to see you get the culture right, you get your curriculum and program right, you put the right people in front of your kids, and they're going to perform really well. And so it's just been a blessing to see. We've, some of the things that we've done or we're working on, we were the first school in Houston to put experiments on the International Space Station. And so when they were being delivered, we had Ted Cruz, which is a graduate of Second Baptist School, and responsible. He chairs the committee on space exploration. And then we had the director of NASA here, and we did a live link with the astronauts on the International Space Station. And so, we believe in STEM and technology, and those things are really important to us. We are doing some really neat things with student support services, and how do we support every learner in our school and make sure that being as inclusive as possible to students that learn differently in what we're doing. And so I don't know about all the individual things that we're doing. Collectively, we have the culture right, we have the right people on the team, and we're seeing great results in the lives of our students, but also in the performance of our students academically. And we're really excited and proud about it.
Man, and culture is, like you just said, so extremely important. You came in there 5 years ago. You said maybe a little bit of toxicity in there. It wasn't great, and you've shifted that. Obviously, it's worked. You've seen it, and isn't it kind of crazy too how you have to very much guard that, especially as head of school and these people you guys are hiring and bringing in. It's like if you get the wrong couple people in the wrong area, it can start to sway that culture that you've worked all these years to build. Has that come up for you guys? Because I think this would also be something for those that are listening to go, hey, it's hard to find teachers right now, but do you risk bringing in somebody just because you're so desperate to have somebody in, but they are not good for the culture and they possibly are doing more harm than good? Have you guys experienced that where you've brought people in and you go, man, we need these teachers, but this is not a good fit or mesh for our culture, and you've had to let them go to search for more? Has that happened these last 5 years multiple times?
Yeah, it has. I think we've followed the old adage of be slow to hire, quick to move on. I hate to use the word firing, but part ways with. Yeah. I think we learned some valuable lessons about building a team, and building a team requires a lot of things. When you get to some place, you want to give every person. So when you're new to an organization, or if you've been there 10 years and you look around to your team, it starts at the top. Says, are these the right people that are supposed to be here? I think that you have a number of levers to pull to shape that team. And I think as a leaders, the first one, we have to have clear expectations. And so when I came here, I listened, I got to know, I cared for, I connected with my people. And then I began to go through a process, and they were part of it, of developing clear expectations of why are we here? How do we behave? What do we do? What are our outcomes? What type of school do we want to be? And we laid that out. And we have a playbook that lays that out really clearly, 2-page playbook. And then there's 3 other pages that our top leadership top leaders in our organization, defines what their key responsibilities are, and everybody has it. And at that point, then you can begin to lead forward. And there's going to be people that do things in your organization that are toxic, that go against your culture, that may hurt students, and you have to part ways right away. People that are going to be negative, people that are going to swim against your culture or try to erode or undermine your culture, you have to part ways for the greater good of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have people that, they're not a negative to the culture. Maybe they're underperforming in some way. Do you need to get them training? That may be part of it. You need to give everybody an opportunity to rise to the occasion and to increase their knowledge, increase their skills to be able to do the job. And then that's setting clear expectations. And when you set clear expectations, when you give people an opportunity, a lot of times, if they can't meet those expectations, they recognize it and they choose to find a different seat on the bus or choose to find a different bus. We've had some of those, and then we've parted ways, with relationships intact. And then as you create clarity on your organization, there's people that are going to step up and rise to the occasion. And we saw that here. And then as people decided we need to find a different seat on the bus, now you can either elevate those in the organization or bring people in from the outside. And I think it needs to be a mix of both to continue to develop that culture where people can see a pathway up, and then people can, you can also get some fresh perspective. And when you look at my executive team, we have a mix. We have, I would say it's almost a third of those that have been here the whole time on that team, that was on that team 5 years ago when I was there. A third of those that have risen up through the organization, our head of lower school has been here 35 years. And this is, she's rising to the occasion to be our head of lower school. And then we have a third maybe that have come in from the outside from other great schools that are bringing a new perspective and to that team. And so I think shaping your top leadership team, your executive leadership team, really is the number one key to developing a healthy culture, because you now have a great team that's healthy themselves and that can serve then the other leaders, the other educators on your campus, so that they can be in a healthy place and they can feel supported, so that then those faculty and coaches and directors can then serve the students and the families. And so I think building that executive leadership team and then each of those executives building their teams in the same way is really important.
And I feel like this has helped with that growth you guys are having right now. If you guys were a complete disaster of an organizational mess, like, hey, we're launching 2 campuses and 2 more over here, you'd be like, no, Don, we're not doing that because we don't even know what we're doing here, but you guys have those things in place. So I feel like from the outside looking in, that's helping, making it quote unquote easier as you guys are scaling to grow into these multiple campuses. Would you agree with that? It's helped with it?
You don't want to duplicate a toxic culture, So we had a healthy culture and we were crystal clear about who we were. That helps you be able to launch those campuses, because you now are launching from a place of strength and trust, mutual trust. You also are very clear about who you are and what you're trying to do. So as you're onboarding both new families and new faculty and staff, it's very easy to cascade that communication down and for people to get the vision and the picture of what you need to be. I mean, for instance, even this year, we will have, 100 new employees and 500, these are rough estimates, 500 new students. And, those 500 plus new students, you're going to have 1,000 or more parents and family members that you've got to get on board. And so that's a lot of people to get aligned with your mission and vision and values and keep a cohesive culture as close knit as our schools and communities are. How do you absorb that many new people that have never done life like this before? You have to make sure that it's clear. It has to be memorable and transferable down the line. And Andy Stanley talks about, in his teaching on mission and values, is you can either be complete or you can be memorable, but you can't be both. And it is much easier to transfer values, mission, culture to newcomers when it's memorable, when it's catchy, when you can grab onto it and repeatable. And so that's what we've tried to implement here.
So good. I have two final questions for you. One is a little right hook because I hadn't give you any heads up for this one, but I think you got this. So you guys are obviously private school, so your finances come from the tuition dollars that come in from the students and their families. But fundraising, I'd love to hear, I've asked a couple guests this, how big fundraising is for you and your school. And if it is, what are some of the ones that you guys are like, man, these are like knock it out of the park ones for us every year that we consistently do, and they're very successful for us as a school?
Okay. So we do a few different things. First, we just finished a capital campaign of $40 million. We're building a new lower school that is going to be 117,000 square foot on 4 campuses. We're excited about that. And so that has its own kind of model and strategy of building a case and, getting your seed money raised and kind of scaling that yearly. So I'll talk about our annual fundraising. We call it the Big Three. And so in the fall, we do a distinguished speaker dinner or a lunch. This year, Scott Drew, that was the national championship winning coach at Baylor University, is coming to speak, and we sell tickets and tables to that. Last year, we raised about $400,000. And then what we do is we divide that up, and that's our Christmas bonus for our faculty at Christmas. So that's in the fall, is our distinguished speaker dinner. People get really excited about that because they know it goes directly to our faculty for a Christmas gift. And that's how we do that. Then we do our second fund. And we have our second fund, which is just our annual raising campaign. And historically, we've divided it up between arts, athletics, technology, and professional development. And really, it's designed on how can we improve the student experience. And so people give to that. And then we would do projects on the backside. More recently, we've began to identify projects we want to do on the front side, and it's actually improved our giving. Last year, we raised $880,000 in our second fund, and that's up $230,000 from our highest year ever. But I think it was because we cast a vision of what we were going to invest the money into before, and people had a better idea of what they were giving for. And then we do Eagle Fest, which is a huge carnival auction in the spring. And that builds our foundation. That's what that money's used for, is to build our foundation. And it is just a big party with an auction. And that usually raises $500,000 or $600,000 in the spring. A lot of that is like sponsoring booths, being like, we bring like a Ferris wheel on campus, and so someone might sponsor the Ferris wheel, for $50,000, and it costs us, $15,000 to put it in the parking lot. And so we do some things like that. And then we have an auction. So we get a lot of like vacations. We get a lot of like experiences where it's like a private plane to go do a hunting trip or something. And so people bid on those, and that money goes, and we're building a foundation that then will support tuition assistance as well as endowed faculty positions on our staff. So those are our 3 big fundraisers. And other than that, we don't do any fundraising.
Love it. Okay. Keeping it simple, because I know they just burn the parents out.
Burn them out.
So I love the idea of like, I've talked to some schools to do one big one, and that's kind of it. And I love the 3. I think I'm a huge fan of just
big 3.
Yeah, I love it. Well, one final question, as we're kind of wrapping it up, is given a chance for you to share a piece of advice for any of the school leaders that are listening. So all those ones that are listening, what would you want to tell them? I
think for me is understand your why. why are you in education? I think for people, it can be different reasons. For us, it is to introduce people to Jesus Christ and then build disciples for him. And so our why is very clear. But Simon Sinek talks about starting with your why, and it has to start there. I would encourage you to get really clear about that. And then I think the other things begin to fall into place. You can begin to make quicker decisions. You have less regret in looking back. And so get a real clear why, and then be crystal clear with your people. Be confident. I know if you're in education, you have a heart for students and you want to see them succeed. Be confident about what you're doing, and people will rally around that.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, Dr. Don Davis, it has been an absolute pleasure interviewing you and hearing from you. And I love what you're doing. I can see it in your eyes and in just how you spoke today. You are passionate about students and what you're doing there at Second Baptist. So wishing you and the school nothing but the best as you guys continue to grow and expand, launch these new campuses, and educate more students in this next generation. So thank you for giving up your time today for the podcast.
Yeah. Mitchell, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Dr. Don for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what they're doing over at Second Baptist School, and I'm wishing them nothing but the best as they continue to grow, start more schools, and educate the next generation that's coming behind us. And like I said at the beginning, I'm hoping you guys are able to take at least one thing from today's episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. And if you're a school listening and you currently have some empty seats in your school that you need to fill so your school can have more revenue coming in, because obviously more revenue means you can pay your teachers more, you can provide more resources to your students and families. We'd love to help you fill those empty seats. You can check us out online, schoolsuccessmakers.com. That's schoolsuccessmakers.com. Or maybe you're more of a Facebook user and you're just trying to get connected with more school leaders across the country. Well, best place would be to join our private Facebook group. It's completely free and it's just for school leaders, called School Success Makers. I'm personally in there and I'd love to see you in there as well. We'll be here next week with another amazing guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then.